What's
Welcome back
happening?
to another Pointless Automotive podcast, another remote edition of the podcast.
It
We are
is.
both battling our own individual battles, I guess, against sickness.
Exactly. Yes,
Uh,
various ailments. I've been stricken with the I want to say disease of modern disease, but it feels like it's been hanging around so long that it's not even modern anymore. It's like old news. Um, I managed to get the COVID virus from the kiddo, which is why we were remote last week. Thankfully, I'm no worse for the wear. Other than a positive test and a slightly stuffy nose, I've been fine. How about you? You hurt your neck, your back.
yeah,
There's a song about it. What? How are you feeling over there?
stacking up multiple things. So I'm sick on top of pinching a nerve in my neck. So why
Sweet.
not? Let's just go for it all. Again, kid got me sick. There's still sicknesses and illnesses out there other than COVID. Go figure,
I've
because we're
heard.
we're both negative. So that's what I'm rocking. That's why I sound a little more hoarse, a little
I was gonna
hoarse.
say something, but
Yeah.
whatever. Two guys, one horse. Yeah, I think. Well, so we're doing this remotely. I think we're gonna try and keep it nice and loose and just kind of shoot from the hip on this episode. I know we were talking about maybe talking about our various automotive foibles and
Yes.
screw ups over the
So
years. I know I've got plenty. You're a little bit more of a buttoned up, straight shooter, organized human being than I tend to be. If you can't tell by the
right.
backgrounds of our in our Zoom chat here that we got going on. So I feel like you've probably made fewer, but I feel like maybe I'm selling you short. How many you got some screw ups in your past when it comes to cars?
Dude, I've got some good ones. And the reason we want to do this is because we are not the gods we appear to be. Just kidding, not even close. But we learn through our mistakes, right? That saying is beaten to the ground because it's true. And today we're going to eat some humble pie, much like Frank's chewing on a humble donut.
Mm-hmm.
um we're gonna,
Maybe.
because honestly the way you learn, and I broke everything down into like the big automotive groups that I kind of shuffle my life under, organize my life under. So I did actually wrenching mistakes I've made, I've got car buying mistakes I've made, and I've got driving track time mistakes I've made. So those are going
Ooh,
to be my three categories, and I've got a few examples of each. You want to talk about working on cars first, Frank? Is that a pretty good way to kick
sure.
this off?
Yeah, we can do that, and you just proved my point because you've got yours all like regimented out, and you've got like different categories, and I'm just like I just have like a general soup of screw ups. But I definitely have. I've definitely done this while turning wrenches. The one I can think of in the wrench turning category, it's also partially related to vehicle purchasing.
Mm,
Um, but it does involve a pretty heavy wrench component of it. So I purchased a 1982 Datsun 280ZX Turbo 2+2 5-speed manual. I bought it for $500. I had dreams of turning this into a Lemons monster.
yeah.
Um, but I got it home. It was way too pretty. Like body was a 9 out of 10. Paint was a 9 out of 10.
Damn.
Interior was probably an 8 out of 10. Had only 115,000 miles on it. But it had a blown turbo, or
Mm.
so I was told
Uh,
from the person I bought it from. He was like, "Hey, yeah, I bought it from several years ago. I drove it for a while. Then the turbo went out. He's like, look, it'll start." And he started it for me, and it was smoking like a chimney out the tailpipe immediately. I checked the fluids. Fluids all look good. And I just said, okay, yeah, sure. It all adds up. Bought it, drug it home, yanked the turbo, some shaft play to it. It was worn. It was probably matched to the mileage. And okay, so I sent it out to get it rebuilt. I went and bought a new OEM turbo oil feed line, which is kind of the bugaboo on those because it's a really long one. It comes from the other side of the block and loops
okay.
around, goes down the back of the firewall, comes down the other side. Do all of that stuff, slowly cobble it back together. And lo and behold, I was kind of sold a bill of goods. I should have done a little bit more homework on it because I didn't do a compression test. I didn't
Mm.
do um, I didn't at this point. I didn't put fresh fluids in it because the fluids looked pretty good. I like shockingly good when I bought it. Um, lo and behold, it either ended up having a cracked head or a bad head gasket. I don't know. I was so fed up with it by the time I'd gotten that far down the road.
Yeah, because you're
But
already in
I
on that turbo,
immediately, because I
you know.
started it, I put the new turbo in, it started, it
Yep.
kept smoking really bad. And I said, okay, well, he's just got to burn some old junk off. So that's fine. Let it idle for a while, drove it around the block a few times. And not only did it not clear up, it actually, then it started running really poorly too. I said, shit. All right, what's going on? I pulled the dipstick and it's just straight milkshake.
Oh, yep.
So I think part of the reason why the fluids looked remarkably good was the guy I bought it from. I don't know if he just put fresh oil in it and threw some coolant in it and decided to sell it as needing a turbo. I
Yep.
don't know if
Seen
it was
that.
that malicious or what, but you know, I just went with what I was told. I looked at two quick things and said that adds up, that adds up. What he's telling me is fine. I totally buy it. And instead of rolling up my sleeves further and pulling all the plugs and doing a compression test and doing some of this other stuff, and if I did that, I probably would have caught it before I had a lot of time and energy and part. I mean, I didn't completely lose my bacon on it because I had bought it for $500. I think at the end of it, I sold it for $1,500.
Yeah. I
So,
imagine it would fetch a quite a pretty penny over that today too,
oh yeah, if
especially
I
in that
had it today, I
condition.
mean, this was 10 or 12 years ago, so this is a little while ago. Um, you know, at the time, if it was perfect, if I had fixed it and immediately sold it, I probably would have gotten maybe seven for it.
Okay.
The guy I bought it from, he had a really nice one that got rear-ended. And he had just rebuilt the engine and everything. So he was going to take the drivetrain out of that, put it in this car, and have one complete, really nice car. So it made sense for him to buy it. Um, but yeah, I screwed up because I didn't do the diagnostic work that I should have done it after I bought it. Because even if the price was right, even if it needed a head, right?
Yeah.
Like at 500
Sure.
bucks, you know, but at that point I was just burnt with it. I was just like, I'm done. Like I'm going to walk away. So I sold it. I made my money back out of it. I didn't really lose a whole lot other than my pride, but, um, yeah, that was kind of a screw up. That was a screw up on my end for certain.
Yeah, and let's keep it in the car buying realm. I have one that piggybacks exactly what you said.
Sure.
We both buy way too many cars, so
Yes, I got more nightmare stories on that front.
become more susceptible to this kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
I call this the trust but verify move. You know,
Hmm.
you want to like when, especially when you're talking with someone, you really want the car. You want to believe what they're saying. They're telling you a good story usually, and like you said, you don't think it's malicious. But when people start giving you these big services that they don't have any records of, they don't have any receipts from a shop, they don't even have the receipts where they bought the parts or any kind of, you know, for example, let's talk about timing belts. No one can, on most cars, it's very tricky to see the timing belt. Some you can remove some of the engine cover, valve cover area to access it, but even then you can't
Right.
tell just by looking at a timing belt. And I love the people that say they can, if they're going to trust,
Okay.
hey, that's a good looking
Yeah,
timing belt.
sure.
Uh, but exactly like you said, when someone comes at me with that kind of like, hey, and I ask, and a lot of times they don't know the difference between a drive belt, a serpentine
Right.
belt, a timing belt, right?
Yep.
So you're like, timing belt, water pump done? Oh yeah, we just did that like a few weeks ago. It was like 30
Yeah.
bucks. So exactly like you said, it's you want to trust them, but you need to really verify because these things are very expensive fixes. And if they send you down the wrong path, like you know, you're out there replacing turbo, sourcing a turbo, and it ends up being
Right.
the engine itself. I mean, that's all your time's gone, all that money's gone. The turbo might have been okay,
It might have been fine. Yeah, but then
right?
that's the thing. That's part of the reason why I got burnt out on it too. Is well, I just milkshake the oil and then blew that right into this freshly rebuilt turbo and this brand new OEM turbo oil feed line. I'm just like, ah,
Yeah,
it's just so defeating.
you probably cashed out at the right time. And my personal example is my first Galant VR4 I bought. I was
Hmm.
driving it around. The guy had told me he did timing belt like 20,000 miles ago, and that's a 60,000 mile interval car to do timing belt
Yep.
water pump. So driving, just probably the fourth time I drove the car. So I've only put a couple hundred miles on it. I
Yep.
get within like a block from home, come to a stop sign, dead. Nothing, no noise, no, won't crank, won't do anything. Timing belt
Hmm.
snapped. I looked at it. That thing had stress marks through the entire timing belt. So
Yeah.
no way. That thing had to be like 15 years old.
Yeah, that was my White VR4. That's what killed that was a timing belt.
Oh yeah, and interference.
Yeah.
So that you're talking head at a minimum.
Well, mine would crank though. I was on freeway speeds. I was on Highway 37 or Highway 780 in Vallejo. When I was going to college up in Sonoma State, I was down in the East Bay visiting with my parents, driving home, and then going 70 miles an hour, and then nothing, just zero power. So I coasted to the side, and I'm cranking it, and I just hear it freewheeling, like,
Yep.
I'm like, that sounds, oh no. And I realized I had no compression, none. And I'm like, oh, timing belt done. And that's what it was. Same deal. I took someone's word on it, and nope.
That's it. So kind of just piggybacking off yours there, exact same thing happened to me too. And now, like, whenever I get a car and I don't have exact proof, I go ahead and do the timing belt. I know it's a big job, but
Yeah.
it's better than doing a head job, I guess.
Sure.
One way to look at it.
Yeah, and not to continue to assault this dead horse with verifying stuff when you're buying a car, but on that same front, I don't know if it's my biggest automotive screw up, because the outcome actually ended up being okay.
Right.
But I was buying a second gen Prius for my dad. Right, he needed a commuter. And so I went out to San Francisco. I was on a lunch break for work. And so I was like super, super tight on time. I had found it on Craigslist. I talked to the dude on the phone. He's like, oh, yeah, it's a good car. The hybrid battery was replaced like 15,000 miles ago. My uncle owns a shop in the East Bay. And so he did it there. And it runs great. Yeah, I've got some time. You want to come on out? He was asking like $4,000, which was good. Good for it was, it had some dents and dings, but don't care about that. Like, it just needs to be a good commuter. Don't care if it's got dents. So I go out there, look at it. It's the interior's in better shape than I had anticipated. The exterior is in probably a little bit worse shape. But so I pull up. He's like, yeah, this is my address. So I pull up to the address. And he's like, yeah, just give me a call when you get there. So I give him a call. He's like, all right, I'll be there in like 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's in the shower scrubbing his cornhole. I don't know, like, whatever. So I wait there for like 5 minutes in South San Francisco. And then dude just pulls up in the car, right? Gets out. And at this point, I'm stressing because it's just like, I'm really, really tight on time. Like, I need to be in and out in like 15 minutes and make a decision, which is the absolute worst way to purchase a car.
Absolutely.
Right. So he just pulls up, gets out of the car, doesn't shut it off. It's still running. Ooh. And he's like, yeah, check it out. So I go around it and poke around. He's like, yeah, take it for a drive if you want. I say, okay, I know you said you had the timing belt done. Or not timing belt, sorry, the hybrid battery done like 15,000 miles ago. He's like, yeah, I can't find the receipt. But the good news though is it was done at my uncle's shop. So, probably either later today or tomorrow, I can have him email it to me and I can email it to you. So you've got it for your records. I said, okay, that, whatever. I drive it around. It drives fine. Again, super pressed for time. So I take it on like a 3.5, 4 minute test drive around the block. Runs, stops, goes, no weird dash lights, nothing. Everything seems to be fine. Okay. So talk to him, haggle him, and anyways, I end up buying it for $3,200. So okay, blah blah blah. Here's the title. He hands me the title. It's already signed and filled out, wow. And the name is different than the name that he gave me when he talked to me on the phone. And I say, okay, well, I thought you said your name was whatever, Mark. And he's like, oh, I just go by Mark, whatever. And it was kind of a very, not Americanized first name. And I said, okay, like I can see like why if you were, Persephone or something, you would go by Mark, right? Yeah. Like, okay, like fine, I'll buy that. Time for time, whatever. Here's the money. Give me the title. Have a nice day. And so then at this point, I said, okay, I'll leave my car here. I'll drive this car back and I'll just Uber back to pick up, or I'll get my dad to come back and get my car. So I hand the guy in the middle. He's like, okay, thanks. And he just he doesn't walk into the house of the address he gave me. He just walks down the street, right, and disappears into the night. I'm like, all right, whatever. Doesn't much matter. Car's fine. I get in it. I start driving and I get like 3 miles down the road and bring, the whole dash lights up like a Christmas tree. Red triangle of death, check engine light, ABS light, all this stuff. I'm like, that ain't right. So I text the guy. I'm like, hey, bro, like literally, I've gone a few miles and everything is lit up on the dash because it was running on fumes. It had like no gas in it. So I went to go put gas in it. He's like, oh, it just does that if it needs gas. I'm like, yeah, no, that's not a thing.
That's an effective fuel warning light. I like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it tells you that there's like, you're in grave danger when you need fuel.
Hey man, did he go with you on that test ride?
No, he just sat there. He's like, yeah, take it for a spin. And I said, okay. So I go around the block.
He was looking at his watch. He's like, if he takes any longer, I'm going to take off because he stalled somewhere.
Right. So, and then the guy ghosts me. He just completely ghosts off the grid. And I'm sitting there. I'm like stomach just falling. Like I screwed this up bad. I know better than this. I absolutely screwed this up. So I put gas in it. I had in my car I brought my scanner with me.
Yep.
Just in case there were any lights on, but there weren't any lights, and I was in a rush, so I just didn't check anything, like an idiot. I plug my scanner in, and it's immediately hybrid battery replacement light. Immediately comes on, and that's what the code is for. So I send the guy some text messages and like, bro, look, I can either try and like nail you for something here. You're obviously trying to defraud me on this. Or you just take the car back, like, and we'll undo this, like whatever. And he just went ghost. And I knew, like he bought the car, he bought the car, never registered it in his name. He bought it for probably $1,000 from some lady in San Francisco who sold it for nothing because she knew it needed a hybrid battery. She didn't want to put the money into it. Yep. So this guy bought it, cleared the code, just looking for a sucker, which was me, to purchase it. And that's exactly what happened. Now, at the end of it, I was able to limp it home. I found a guy who was able to rebuild that existing battery for like $300.
That's awesome.
And then my dad got another couple of years use out of it. And then I eventually sold it for about what I had. I sold it for like $3,800. So, it ended up okay. But I was mortified because I knew I got like immediately. And I knew what to look for, but because my back was against the wall, time-wise, I didn't give myself the opportunity to do what I needed to do on that vehicle. And I completely screwed it up. If I didn't find a dude on Craigslist who ultimately was trustworthy and rebuilt that battery, and was a really cool dude, I would have been completely screwed. If I had to buy a replacement battery for that to the tune of like $3,500, like game over. I would have just lost several $1,000s because of me trying to rush things. So Don't do that, everybody. Don't do it. Don't
car
rush.
Car buying is risky business. Like if you don't know what you're doing or you're trying to rush into something, you're just setting yourself up for a bad day.
Yes. And even if you know what you're doing and you try and rush your way through it, like, oops, you're gonna step on your junk every time.
My last and second car buying section is the can of worms cars. Yeah. Those cars where they have like an identified issue and you're like, oh man, I just need to fix this. And I got a great car, got a great deal. Can't wait to drive this thing. And you fix one thing, two other things break, right? Further down the line. So to look out for those, you want to look at someone with an honest service history and someone that knows what they're talking about. Like if someone says they just need one part fixed, there's a big issue there. You have to do your research before you pull the trigger on that car. Even if it's like a remarkable deal, you can really get upside down so quick with those things. Like, hey, it just has a misfire. The code says it's just the coil pack. It's a $20-something coil pack. Just go ahead and swap it out. And you're like, why didn't you do this and just sell the car without this issue? And then you switch the coil
that would
pack.
make sense. You can't do that.
Yeah. And then you switch the coil pack out and the misfire is still there. And you're like, And then you find out maybe something's wrong with the cam or something. And then lo and behold, it's been running like this for a while with this misfire and your catalytic converter's gone and your OT sensors.
Right.
So I call those the can of worms cars, the cars that you can tell are just getting patched up. Like you said, clear the codes, pass it on. That's why you always check to see if everything's like
You
the
look at all the
monitors.
readiness monitors.
You
Yep.
got to check your monitors.
Have to.
But yeah, people just clear the code, pass it on. And I'm sure that guy on your test drive was like getting ready to like take off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was just like, okay, like he probably could pick up that I was in a bit of a rush. Like I showed up in work clothes, and like he just,
Yep.
there was kind of blood in the water at that point. But yeah, that's the same thing. Is don't when even if you think you know every single thing about what you're buying,
Mm-hmm.
still be prepared to find some stuff that's going to be wrong with it.
Right.
But leave no stone unturned when you're doing all that.
That's exactly it. What do you got for me now? I know you got something else.
Um, have you ever forget to set your parking brake? Ever in the history of driving a manual or leave it in gear? You ever done that?
I've definitely stalled before, like thinking I'm in neutral and shutting the car off and like letting
Okay.
off, and
And
it
then you
lurches
roll a second.
forward.
You're like, whoa, hold on.
And you play it
So
cool. You're like, I meant to do that.
yeah, totally. So when I was in college, one of my college vehicles is a '98 Acura Integra
Mhm.
LS sedan, 5-speed manual. Great car.
Cool. Yeah.
And it was a daily driver. I drove it all the time. And at the time I was living in a little condo complex, had like one of like all the parking spaces that you just regular parking spaces you park in. And everyone had an assigned parking space under like a little like a carport kind of. Pull into the carport, go in there, go inside, have lunch, take a nap, do whatever. I don't remember. Just regular day. And then I happened to had a little balcony. It was on a second story. And I happened to look out the window, like out off the balcony, and I just see the Integra is not in the parking space anymore. It's just in the middle of like the aisle that you drive down. And I'm like, what the hell? And I thought like somebody was stealing my car, right?
Did someone ghost ride the whip? I mean, can we still say that? I think we can.
Yeah, I mean, I did like from an extreme distance ultimately. Because what happened was I thought let's face it, it's a 98 Integra. It's gonna get stolen, right?
Sure.
So I look out and I just see it in perfectly, completely like perpendicular to the parking space, out perfectly in the middle of like the aisle that you drive down. So I go, what the hell? So I run down, I grab my keys, I run downstairs, and it's just sitting there, right? Car's locked. It's just sitting there. It just so happened that when I made like the 90-degree left turn into my parking space, I must have forgot to put it in gear, forgot to put the parking brake on. And because I never turned the wheel straight, it just undid what I did. And it just made that perfect 90-degree turn back into the lane and just sat there.
What are the odds?
Zero. And the fact that it didn't hit any cars going by.
Yeah, it didn't drag a bumper across someone parked next to you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it was several hours that I noticed that went by between when I parked and when I noticed it. And I'm like, whoa. And I go out there and, I was, whatever it was, 21, 22 at the time. And I'm just like, oh. So I get it, get inside, pull it back and leave it in gear, put the parking brake. And then you never, ever, ever, ever forget again to set all that stuff. And it was fairly, it could have been I mean, if you think about how on the scale of like good to bad, how bad that can be, that's definitely the best on the scale of like outcomes, because you do that and it just rolls into someone's living room or their bat mitzvah or an orphanage that's actively on fire. Like, I don't know, it could have gone like 1,000 ways wrong, and it went about the only singular way that it could have gone right. So I got super lucky there, but it's just enough shot across the bow for me to be like, okay, yep, parking brake, check. In gear, check. Okay, shut it off.
I personally hope someone was going down that aisle and saw your car do that and honked at you to move.
Move it, asshole! Yeah, you know what? I hope it was actually. I hope it was E40 that saw that, and he was singing about ghost riding the whip while it was going down, and it just that would have been
inspiration right there for the song.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not going to take full credit for "Tell Me When to Go," but just partial credit. I think he saw what was going down. So yeah, I guess it's just me. Maybe I'm the only person that forgets to set their parking brake. I don't know.
Oh, it happens. I definitely have forgotten to put automatics in park and shut them off like every time I drive an automatic now.
Sure. Yeah, that's part of the deal. Definitely. You're like, why can't I get the key out of the ignition? Oh, park. Yeah.
But I got a wrenching one I kind of want to hit upon, and it kind of
Yeah.
relates to where you mentioned don't ever rush when you're doing things automotive related.
Yes.
So I was going to the track day the next day. My buddy had at this time, this was 2013. I had a modified Subaru Legacy Spec B, which was my
Okay.
little like get around fun track toy too.
Sure.
Super fun car. And my buddy had a 335i that was super modified. So it was like really competitive, those two cars.
Hmm.
So we're getting ready. I had a long day at work. I get home and I'm like, man, I really need to do an oil change. So
Right.
I get the Spec B in the driveway because I had two cars in the garage. I was rushing. So I had it up
Sure.
on ramps.
Right.
Dude, doing it in the dark. It's like 9:30 at night. That we're leaving at 4 to go to Monterey down to Laguna Seca the next
Sure.
morning. So I've got the car up, doing the oil change in the dark. Never do that, first
Yes.
of all. Everything's going well. New filter on there, royal purple oil in, ready to rock
Brilliant.
and roll, man. Ready to have a good track day.
Let's go.
Start the car up, back it off the ramps, just oil everywhere, like a purple waterfall down my driveway.
Drain plug.
Nope, oil filter O-ring left on there from the old oil filter.
So you
Yeah.
double stack them?
Yo, you bet.
Yeah.
So it felt snug going on, let me tell you, real snug.
Sure.
And this is like one of those things, like, you know, even I had been working on cars at that point for like many years, but we still have to take our time. Whenever we rush things, whatever we're in less than ideal situations in the dark, trying to get that done. So now I was left with a horrible disaster. So I had to borrow. Well, luckily I always have multiple cars. So I had to go shuffle the car out. Luckily there was enough space to back it out of the garage that I was blocking. Go run and get oil from the parts store like before it closes at 10. Come back, clean that disaster up and do an oil change.
What a mess.
Yeah, and then trying to drive, like I got like 4 hours of sleep. But yeah, so it's just like one of those things. Whenever it's like a less than ideal situation, just stop, take your time, take a breath, and like make sure you're checking all your boxes again, because it was pretty costly. You know, if I didn't get to the parts store in time, I didn't have any oil on hand. I don't know what I would have done. You know, because the car wasn't drivable because it had no oil.
Well, sure. Yeah, that kind of limits things a little bit.
So fun stuff like that. You know, you see me take apart an engine like it's nothing, but you got to remember I can even mess up an oil change. So you always have to keep that. You have to keep that humbleness in your mind.
Yeah, you know what? I'm kind of sensing a theme here because in my next one, it kind of feeds into that a little bit too. It's just like, take your time, like slow down, you know, because generally speaking, even in life, but definitely in the automotive world, like and any opportunity where you're like hustling your way through something and you're really not taking the time to do it right and slow down and cross your T's and dot your I's is when things get screwy.
Right. And we're not on shop time, fortunately. So I understand like mechanics
have a foreman beating down my neck. Yeah,
they've got their shop books, shop time for their books. They got to do exactly what the job calls for. We're not on that scale usually, so we should be taking our time.
Absolutely. And kind of another interesting one I wanted to get into was I have my 1941 Chevy half-ton pickup truck, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, it's an absolute bucket of bolts. You know, going more than 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour feels you're absolutely white knuckling it.
An adventure.
It's very, very primitive. And I had a lot of work done on it by a buddy of mine who has he kind of like runs like a restoration shop out of his garage in Vallejo. And I had a bunch of stuff going on, didn't have time to get to it. I said, hey, you want to just like long-term project this thing? Because it was sitting for like a decade and it needed all new brakes. It needed, we had an old 4-speed crash box in it with no synchros. We put a 3-speed synchro box in it. All new fuel system, boiled the fuel tank out, you know, got it out of mothballs. And so it was done. It was finally ready to go home, right? So he lives in Vallejo. I'm here in Martinez. It's not a long distance, but there's like a highway and a bridge involved and stuff that this car is not really all that comfortable doing. So I get in it, I start my drive. The gearbox is a little clunky. And so you really want to double clutch. You strictly don't have to, but it's a lot happier if you're doing that. So I'm like trying to learn how to double clutch it and do all this stuff. And I go put gas in it before I leave to go across this bridge and hold up traffic and do the whole thing. And so I'm driving it and I notice as I'm leaving the gas station, that the brakes feel like they're grabbing a little bit, like they're not completely releasing. Like if I coast, if I let off and I coast, it'll come to a stop, and it'll like once I get to like 1 or 2 miles an hour, it'll kind of like stop on its own, like I'm barely on the brakes. I'm like, well, this is weird. So I called my buddy Glenn, who was working on it. I'm like, hey, did you know this? He says, like, no. And it was every single component in the brake system is brand new. Huh. And he's like, I've driven it around town. I didn't, he's like, I put probably 25 miles on it and haven't had any issues with it. I didn't notice anything. I said, okay, well, I hadn't really driven the truck, let alone something from the 40s that much. I'm like, okay, maybe it's in my head. I get it across the bridge. I'm driving. I go up. I take these back roads because I don't want to stay on main freeways, right?
Right.
And I'm going up a hill, coming Skyway, which is near us. It's like a long, shallow upgrade and then back down. And I'm going up it. I'm like, man, I've really got to give it everything to get up this hill. It's an old non-pressurized oil system, inline six, like it doesn't have a lot of power. So I'm like, okay. And it's smoking a lot because it was sitting for a decade, and it damn near would run on kerosene anyway. So like it's just this jalopy. But I'm really having to beat on it to get up this hill. I'm like, man. And then I'm coming down the hill. And when I'm coming down the hill, which is not kind of close to the finish line, I can really feel the brakes are actually grabbing. And that's why I had to hustle it up the hill. And I'm like, oh boy, like these brakes are binding. And I'm like, I'm close to home. I've made it this far. I'm just gonna limp it there. So there's a quick freeway spot that I have to take. I come down the hill. I get off the freeway. I'm like less than a half mile from the house. And at this point, the brakes are grabbing hard to the point where, like, if I'm in second gear and I let off the gas, it stalls it.
Oh my!
Like and like stalls it out, and I'm like, dude, I just got to limp it around the corner, get it to the house, and then I'm done, and then I can do a post-mortem on what's going on with the brakes.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, whatever. The brakes are going to be hot, but they are what they are. They're probably already done for at this point anyways, right? So I'm just going to limp it around the corner. So I make like the last quarter-mile push where I'm just pinned in first gear, just getting it. It's a 3-speed, so, whatever. Pinned in first gear, I'm doing 15 miles an hour, going. And then I make the last turn onto my street, and I only have 150 feet to go. And the brake pedal just goes whoop, straight to the floor.
Oh, good.
Completely gone. No brakes. They're gone. So I coast, and I can smell the brakes. I can absolutely just smell them. It just reeks of friction material. So I'm like, ah. So I have to. Thankfully, there's nothing parked in front of my house or the house next to mine, right? Because I have no brakes. I pull on the parking brake. Parking brake's gone now. No parking brake. No brakes. I'm in first gear. I just dump the clutch. And then I grind the right front tire on the curb, right? I slide past my house. I stop in the curb in front of my neighbor's house, right? Just ground the tire, and the tires were junk. I didn't care about the tires. Ground it against the wheel, came to a stop, right? Stuff it in gear, shut it off, and I hop out, and the left rear wheel is just on fire. It's just,
oh yeah, just
literally engulfed. Because what happened was it boiled the brake out so much that the wheel cylinder popped, and then it's just dumped the entire. It's a single circuit. It's an old single circuit brake system.
Yeah, you literally came in hot.
Yeah, and so it just went and pushed all the fluid straight into the boiling brake drum. And just combusted, right? So I go, my wife comes out and is like, what's going on? I'm like, nothing, brakes are on fire, don't worry about it. So I run inside the house, I go under the sink, and I grab a fire extinguisher, and I walk and I jog over to that side of the car, and right when I get there, boom, the left rear tire just explodes. Just absolutely grenades. Because it was also so hot, right? And there were junk old tires anyway, so it just boom, completely blew out, which meant I didn't have to use the extinguisher because it blew the fire out, right? It just went, put out the fire.
Side effect.
And I'm sitting there, and it's just like, it's all hobbled now. There's like smoke pouring out of the brakes and the rear circuit. I'm just like, it's also why the parking brake didn't work, because it was hooked up on the one driver's side, single drum.
So what led us to this epic failure, Frank? What What do you want to share?
Mechanically, or what's the lesson to be learned? Because
Ooh.
mechanically, it was the brand new made in China master cylinder.
Oh,
It was only like anytime you'd apply the brake, it would let off like 99% of the brake pressure, but
okay.
it would hang up and just leave about 1% of pressure in the system. And then every time you push it again, it would bind up a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until, then I come off the freeway that half mile from my house on the brakes, happen to stop
Hard.
it.
Yep.
And then it was like really binding up an already cooked brake system. So yeah, what I should have done was just done the calm thing. And when I really noticed coming down that hill, like, oh boy, these brakes are really binding up. Let me
Just
just
cut
pull
it.
this thing over,
Yep.
figure out. And if I got to eat $100 tow, okay, that certainly is a whole lot better than, because at that point the entire rear brake system had to be redone. Everything, both
Right.
wheel cylinders, both drums, all the hardware, everything, all of it.
Yeah.
I filed a warranty claim on the guys that sold me the brake master cylinder, and there was only one game in town to get it for that truck.
Oh.
And at that point they're like, oh yeah, we literally sold you the very last one we have. So I couldn't get another. It was on back order for a year. I couldn't even get a replacement. And it was that there was a casting on the way the actual body of the master cylinder was cast. It had an imperfection in the casting, and so the piston wasn't returning quite all the way.
Yeah. So I think the takeaway from that one would definitely be if you do suspect something critical is failing in your car,
Don't push
safely
it.
abort the mission at that
Yes,
time.
absolutely.
And don't take a fiery, exploding wreck in front of your house like Frank did.
Exactly. I mean, that's another one where I kind of got off scot free. Like that could have been, that's not a vehicle you want to wreck. Like there's no,
if you were coming
the
off
only
like
reason
a
it has
highway,
seatbelts in it.
if you were coming off like a highway off ramp into a like stoplight when it
Yeah.
decided to totally fail, game over.
Yeah, it'd be like, no, it'd just be a steel coffin at that point, because there's no, it's got like a non-collapsible steering column. I mean, you don't want to wreck a pre-war vehicle like
No.
on modern roads, like just no. So
Cool.
yeah, another one. Slow down, take a second, figure it out. Don't just push it. And that's exactly what I did. And I got lucky, but yeah, it's just another lesson learned. How about you? You got any more lessons?
Yeah, I got one more. We're up against time here, but another wrenching one. We'll save the track day stories for another exciting episode.
Yes.
But torque specs. I want to talk about torque specs. And since this is us recognizing our own mistakes, our own naivety, or our own shortcoming in trying to do things ourselves, in my youth, torque specs, everybody, it's snug enough. How many ugga-duggas you put that bolt on?
Several.
But some things, like overdoing torque specs, is just as bad as underdoing them a lot of times. And there are some sensitive parts out there. And I learned at a very tender age that aluminum really shouldn't have too many foot-pounds of torque pushed into it. So where I learned that lesson was my Galant VR4 again, doing the valve cover gasket. Those gaskets, anyone out there in the DSM communities, Galant VR4s, you guys know that the aluminum casting on those things is literally tinfoil. If you go an inch pound too far, you're going to hear a click and there's going to be a crack. And then the next time you drive your car, your little well where the spark plugs go will be a nice swimming pool of the fresh oil your engine's leaking. So I can't stress that enough. I mean, it just happened when I redid yours, when I was restoring Frank's Galant VR4. When I drove it back after I purchased it, it was full of oil. And then I didn't notice, I didn't think anything, because sometimes, so that design is horrible. There's like a valley there where if you overfill the oil, it just goes down there. So you don't want to assume, but
super common.
It's hard to see a hairline crack in those aluminum valve covers. But anyway, get it all back together, go for a drive. It's just oil dripping out from the valve cover. And sure enough, there was a crack. One of the bolts was just over tightened a little bit. So, and there's so many cars, like I've done that. I definitely cracked the valve cover, which back in the day was not a big deal, but come to find out when I did your car in modern time, these valve covers are hard to get. They used
because everyone cracks them.
Used to trip over them back in the day. There's so many stacked up. They were like 20, 40 bucks most. And now they're like almost 200 for non-cracked valve covers. So
all it takes is one episode of having to install like a Healy coil on like a cylinder head, or
Oh,
having to bust out the easy out and trying to back off a broken stud or a broken bolt, and just praying and keeping your fingers crossed the whole time while you're trying to get that drill for the easy out to go through. You do that once or twice, and then you quickly realize the benefit of proper torque spec on stuff, and not
exactly.
just sending it every time.
Yeah, sending it just gets you in so much trouble. And plus, you cross thread. You always like, I don't know how this has escaped everyone. I know it's time. I know it's like quick lube places that just send everything, right? It's like I'm doing the water pump on this E30 BMW, the 325i, and the water pump has 10 millimeter bolts that are supposed to be like 8 foot-pounds of torque. And these things are cross-threaded, and they have actually warped the pulley, the front of the water pump pulley. Someone sent them in so hard. I don't even
Yep.
know how you send a 10 millimeter bolt that hard, but
Yeah, especially in that location. Like I don't know.
it's like a bolt that's like literally a quarter of an inch long, and they just so
Yeah,
that's it. You know, I'm guilty too, and I do torque. I don't torque every single bolt I touch. It's just senseless. Some of these
right.
bolts don't need to be torqued, but like I've also rebuilt heads, and you bet I have my snap-on torque wrench for everything I touch. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, you
Timing
got to know.
components,
Yeah,
certain suspension components.
same. Yep.
You know, it makes sense.
Boy, oh boy. But yeah, and we've got more lessons, I'm sure, we under our belts that we could share at another time. But just we really wanted to share with you guys that, you know, go in there, be humble, you know, realize you make your mistakes, but
Yep.
learn from those mistakes. Don't make the same mistake again and again, because that's just stupid.
It is
We've got
just
no
stupid.
pity. We've got no pity for you.
Exactly, a pity party. You know what else is relatively stupid?
Uh-oh.
It's a game that we play.
A game with no name.
A game with no name. We still have no name. We might just call it the game with no name. I don't know.
I like
But
it.
I do have a piece of automotive advertising copy, print copy, from an 80s, 90s, or early 2000s magazine ad that I will read. Chadwick will answer. And he's going to have to, that answer he's going to have to come up with is, what's the make, what's the model, what kind of car are we talking about? So I will read the ad copy. I will mentally and verbally blank out some of the trademark, manufacturer, make and model components. And it's on my partner in crime here, Chadwick, to figure it out.
And every
Are
time
you
I
ready?
flounder and miss, I can ask for some help, some assistance, and I'm
Yes.
getting ready to do that because Frank brings nothing but the obscure to this table. So,
Yeah, I think this one's going to be the last couple I fed you were of the highest difficulty. This one's going to be, I think, a middle of the road one. This should be good.
It's
I
more
think.
pressure. It's more
No,
pressure.
I don't know. I think you've got hope to get this one. And we are doing baseball rules here, so we get 3 guesses, 3 strikes, you're out. And today, I'm going to read this one.
Let's do it.
Okay. New engine, new transmission, improved suspension, and I think most people liked it the way it was. On this date, the presses at Car and Driver rolled and declared the blank, the quote, best sports sedan under $25,000. That night, the engineers at blank quietly celebrated and took pleasure in the knowledge that the press hadn't, well, seen anything yet. For that same month, the new blank was launched. A car our engineers had completely re-examined, revamped, and retooled, literally from the ground up. At a glance, the blank engine, and you immediately detect a perfectionist mentality bordering on the obsessive. For there lies a new 3.0 liter 24 valve double overhead cam V6 multi-point fuel injected variable valve timed engine. As a result, the 0 to 60 time has been reduced by more than a second to a seat pressing 6.7 seconds, and horsepower has surged to an adrenaline pumping 190, giving new meaning to the term 4-door sports car. Of course, in our engineers' minds, a totally new engine dictated equally radical changes to the transmission. A new front viscous limited slip differential transfers additional power to whichever front wheel has greater traction. So both stability and your self-composure are never lost. And a remarkable revamped four-wheel independent suspension system allows you to negotiate curves without compromise, responsiveness, or performance. Some things on the blank, however, take years to appreciate. Because over a 2-year period, the blank retains 70% of its value, higher than BMW 325 and Acura Legend. All of which suggests there's one thing our engineers can't change on the blank: our customers' satisfaction with it. The table is yours, my friend.
There's a lot to process.
It is.
What was the, I'm sorry, the what was the Acura make that it compared it to? The BMW 325?
It said sorry, that would be the BMW 525.
525, sorry.
Yeah, so the 5 Series and the Legend.
Legend.
Hmm.
Okay. That helps with my time assessment. So we're talking probably late 80s here, would be my guess. So 190 horsepower out of a 3-liter dual overhead cam. Interesting number.
Yes. Yes.
Front wheel drive?
It
was talking about the front
front viscous limited slip differential. So that would lead me to believe, unless it's the strange all-wheel drive that only has a limited slip front, which would be bizarro.
That would be something new, huh?
Yeah.
It's out there, I'm sure. So front wheel drive, 190 horsepower. Oh boy, this is interesting. New engine and trans, so it's something that existed, and it's maybe an upper version of the base model.
Perhaps.
Comparing to BMW 525 and Acura. Took a German and a Japanese competitor, so I'm thinking it might be American. Just shooting from the hip. Okay, well, let's see what we got here. 4-wheel independent. Boy. So it's a sedan, and they didn't pick the small BMW, so it's probably a larger sedan. You did say sedan, right? Sports sedan at the beginning.
Giving new meaning to the term 4-door sports car.
Under 25K. This sounds like the best deal ever.
Sounds like a screaming deal.
Wow. Man, where are we going to go with this? 3-liter. I can't think of any. No. Man, I'm really stumped on this. I want to say American.
Yeah, I don't think there's any specific hints to the
Wait a sec.
Region of the world that it was manufactured. There is a photo of the engine in the ad copy, so that it has a rear driver's side 3/4 shot of the vehicle.
Okay.
In the main photo, and then in the bottom middle, there's like a slightly large postage stamp photo where it has an image of the vehicle, the engine.
Okay.
But I can't really read. Well, let me read it has a blurb under it. Let me read it, but I'm gonna have to blank out some additional information. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't even ask about what the ad actually looks like.
Yeah. It says, like our legendary blank, the blank's new 3.0-liter 190 horsepower double overhead cam V6 engine features variable valve induction plenum system on the 5-speed, which utilizes an intermediate valve to regulate air intake flow for better performance at low to mid-range RPMs. The new blank shown in super black with optional ABS brakes, driver's side airbags, and 4-speed automatic transmission.
So it's available in manual too, huh?
Yes. 5-speed manual, 4-speed auto.
Oh, I don't
ABS
know.
brakes.
I'm going to take a stab here. I'm going to say early Lexus ES 300.
Reasonable guess. That is not correct. It is not the Lexus ES. But I will tell you this. My hint will be you are correct as to the country of origin. With Japan.
So, well, it's definitely not an Acura. It's definitely I would probably say we're in Infinity Land, right? Yeah, gotta be. I'm so bad with if this is Infinity, Frank, I'm so bad with my Infinity models from this period. I think they did. Well, let's see if it is an Infinity.
Okay.
I think the naming convention actually did used to relate to the engine displacement.
Yes, that is correct.
The 45 was a 4.5. They had the 30s that would be a 3.0.
Yes. G20 was a 2-liter.
2-liter, yep. Which was a Primera, but
yeah.
Geez, man. Yeah, let's go with Infinity. What was their sedan? Had to be the i30, Infinity i30.
There was an i30.
Let's do it. It was atrociously ugly. Let's go for that.
Okay. In with the guess of the atrociously ugly Infinity i30. That is incorrect.
Oh boy.
However, you are very close.
Yeah.
I don't think you can ever get an i30 in a manual. I will say the actual car, you're very close. The next hint I'm going to give you is when it says giving new meaning to the term 4-door sports car. That is very, very important to the lineage and the nomenclature of this vehicle, to the point where there was actually decals on the car to that effect.
That's a 4-door sports car?
Yes. Or I believe 4DSC as it. And it would literally be on like the door glass, like a small little decal.
Oh, that's an oddly specific hint that I don't know.
But yeah, that was like this car's it wasn't their customize your life like
right. Actually, can I ask for just like a clarification?
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of a hint. Since I'm about to bomb this. Can we go, is it a luxury oriented brand, or is this a normal Japanese brand?
It is not a luxury oriented brand. However, I would say it was probably the flagship sedan of this brand.
Okay.
So like, for instance, it's not this car, but like the Avalon would be like the flagship Toyota sedan.
Sure. Yeah.
But it wouldn't be, it's not a Lexus. Right. Yeah. Very similar.
Is this a brand we love that we no longer love what they're doing with the automotive stuff?
I would say that's accurate. Although I think they're potentially turning a corner here recently with some of their newer offerings.
All right. I've got two that I think it could be, and they're actually market competitors.
Okay.
Oh my God. Let's just go for it. I'm going to go with, well, didn't in the recent one, they called themselves the 4-door sports car too recently, because they were like, hey, it's a 350Z, and they stretched it out in a commercial.
Maybe.
Because it's a Nissan Maxima.
Maybe.
That's my guess. Final answer. Nissan Maxima.
The answer is, where's a good way I can read it? For that same month, the new 1992 Nissan Maxima SE was launched.
Yeah,
it is that is where, yeah. So the Nissan Maxima you can get the 4DSC 4-door sports car badge you would have on the quarter glass.
But that came back with like a couple, maybe quite a bit ago. Remember they showed a 350Z in the commercial? And they're like, I want a sports car, but I got a family. And they showed them actually stretching it out.
I remember that one. I do remember that one. Yeah. And that was like their calling card forever, was like the Maxima was the 4DSC, the 4-door sports car.
Dude,
that's exactly it.
Awesome, man. My other guess, just so you know, Mitsubishi Diamante.
I know the way you phrased that, I thought maybe you were going to go Diamante. But the i30 is basically a tarted up Nissan Maxima. That's why I'm
Right.
like, that
That's
you're
why I went
very
there.
close. You're very close. Although like the Maxima SE was like the sports car, the four-door sports car, but an i30 is like opposite of a sports car. It's just like squishy and flabby and dead axle rear and all that. But
Right.
I would kill for one of these Maximas.
They looked great too. Super
Yeah,
boxy looking.
exactly. It was. I remember when I was doing the insurance stuff, I wrote an estimate on one, and I had to total it out, and I felt super bad about it. But it was like the perfect spec, 92, which is the first year of the kind of restyled round year one that you can get it with the basically the almost the same motor that's in the non-turbo Z. Then that's
Oh
what that
yeah,
was.
yeah.
Where it says that part that I read where our legendary blank, this motor was borrowed from, basically was it said from, as in our legendary Z car,
Yeah.
is what the line was. But yeah, I had to total this one out, and it was just like I felt super bad about it because it was black on black, 5-speed manual, had the white
Ooh,
face gauges. It was
heck yeah.
super clean, and some old lady backed into the quarter panel and blew the quarter panel up, and it was just like a quarter panel. I had to total it out, and I felt bad because it had like 110,000 miles. It was like mint, and it was they don't exist anymore. And it would be that would be a killer daily driver right now. It's
Oh
got good
heck yeah.
power, it's comfy, it's reliable. I want one.
Dude,
So well done, sir. You pulled it out there in the last minute. You pulled it from the jaws of defeat.
thanks, man. Well, that's tough because that segment has so many cars that are like competitive and all
Mm-hmm.
have same specs, same claims. Like those 4 cars, including the Diamante, all like basically could fit in there almost.
Yeah, I was worried about the four-door sports car thing because if you know, then you know. Like when I read that line, you would like, oh, Maxima, it's easy.
It was the new commercial that got me because I remember they were
That's funny
stressing that, trying to bring that back.
that was their thing. Very cool. Well, hat tip. I'm not wearing one, but if I was, I would tip it. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Before we tidy this thing up,
Want to
what
celebrate?
I know both of us have been kind of had our hands tied as far as getting a whole lot of production stuff done. With your various maladies, were you able to get anything done or make
Yeah.
any
So
progress on the PCP front?
yeah, it's hard to do PCP, Project Car Progress, when you're not feeling well.
True.
Some minor things. I don't know if I mentioned last time, but I got the water pump into the BMW, so that's all
Sweet.
nice, secured in. Everything's torque spec.
Ooh, yes, of course. Very important.
Lesson of the day. So that's good to go. And then I'm making some more progress. You can see the tracer back there, getting some fresh paint, 260,000 miles in California.
Sweet.
No rust, but it sure likes to get its sun baked paint going on. So
Cool.
fixing that, trying to make it look a little prettier, not too pretty. We don't want to step out of our class.
Right.
But,
Exactly.
that's
cool.
really all I've had to do, man. So it's been pretty low on that front. But how about you? Any wrench turning or anything at all?
Nothing too much. Have been doing a little bit more on the photo booth micro van. So
Nice.
more on the K van, the sandbar, just behind me in the video. And yeah, I was able to get the rear bench seat situated and bolted down and screwed down tight. I had to chop some of the carpet up to make that work. Same with I got the actual photo booth apparatus installed.
Nice.
So that's all there. And so, yeah, now it's just I got some wiring I got to do. I've got some software stuff I have to do on the photo booth part itself. But, that's really all I've been able to get done in the past week. I've been home with the kid because he hasn't been able to go to school because of COVID. So
Yep.
I was able to get some of that stuff done, which is good. But it was more, that's more of the project and less of the car, really, because
Right.
it wasn't a whole lot of wrench turning. It's just like interior modifications. And I started to reupholster these rear side panels with this sweet 90s graphic stuff.
Saved by the Bell-esque.
Exactly. Yes.
Nice.
Saved by the Bell. So that's kind of what I've got going on there. Otherwise, plugging away at it. And just like we're plugging away at this whole podcast thing. So
Heck yes.
we're still doing this. Still tell your enemies to tag along and chime in.
Yep. We make
yeah.
wonderful background noise. I heard we're pretty much like white noise. So just throw the podcast on. If you don't want to
Right.
actively follow along, you can just play it in the background. Whatever
Yeah,
works.
just let it go do its thing, and enjoy the ambiance that is our all sultry dulcet tones. That's pretty much it. So
Yeah.
I guess
Hopefully
we'll wrap it.
Yeah, hopefully you can learn from some of the mistakes we made, so you don't have to make them yourself
Absolutely.
in your journey
Yes.
of life.
Relish in our
But
pain so you don't have to. Um, and then, yeah, we'll be back at this again next week. So thanks for hanging along. Thanks for tagging along. And I know I said this last week, but hopefully next time we'll be in the same place at the same time, able to do this. So
let's do it.
let's do it. All right. Thanks, y'alls.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Deuces.